We have an object, which I will represent by this dot. This object is being acted on by two forces, force F1 and force F2. F1 looks like this. It has 220 newtons, and it forms an angle of 30 degrees. And force 2 looks something like this. It's 375 newtons, and it forms 340 degrees, 340 degrees with the horizontal. So 2a asks you to complete the diagram to show the resultant of the two given forces. Now you can do tip to tail method, or you can do completing the parallelogram. So if you do complete the parallelogram, it kind of looks like this, with your resultant vector over here. Now in question B, 2b, you're asked to find the magnitude of this resultant, so let's call this R for resultant. Well, to find the magnitude of the resultant, you're going to have to find the components of the resultant. And to find the components of that, you're going to need to find the components of these two vectors, F1 and F2, because their sum will give you the components of R. So let's write that down. R equals the sum F1 plus F2. So the sum of F1 plus F2. Alright, so finding the components of F1. Using SOHCAHTOA trigonometry, we can find the vertical and horizontal components. So, starting with the horizontal component, we see that cosine of 30 degrees is equal to adjacent, which we'll call x, over hypotenuse, which is 220, which implies that x, our horizontal component, is equal to 220 times cosine of 30. So with our calculators, we do 220 times cosine of 30, and that gives us 190, 190.52. 190.52. And the vertical component, y, is equal to 220 times sine 30. Now you can do this ratio, and you'll see you'll come out with y equals this. 220 times sine 30, with our calculator, 220 times sine 30 is 110. So these are the components of F1. The components of F2 are, so we're going to need the angle in here in order to use SOHCAHTOA. And it shouldn't be too hard to see that if you add 20 degrees to the 340 degrees here, you complete the circle and you've brought this arrow back to the horizontal. So this is 20 degrees here. Now F2 has x component equal to 375 cosine of 20. With our calculators, we get 375 times the cosine of 20. That's 352.38. 352.38, comma, and y equals 375 sine of 20. 375 times sine of 20. That gives us 128.25. 128.25. So these are F1 and F2. Therefore, R equals, and we're going to add this, so we have 190 plus 352.38. That's 452.38. 542. 542.38, comma. Now 110 plus 128.25 is 238. 238.25. So here are the components of R. Now to find the magnitude of R, we use Pythagoras, and that's 542.28 squared plus 238.25 squared, all of that square rooted. And that gives us, with our calculators, that gives us 542.38 squared plus 238.25 squared equals, and now square root, that's 592.4. 592.4. So this is the magnitude of our resultant vector. Now if I were to find the orientation, let's find this orientation here, call it theta, and theta equals, because we know the components, it's tan inverse of opposite 238.25 divided by adjacent 542.38. And with our calculator, 238.25 divided by 542.38, and then we take the tan inverse of this, that's 23.7 degrees. 23.7 degrees.